To help you to prepare to write a poem that personifies a scene in nature, first we're going to review what personification is. Then we're going to listen to the song Time by Hootie and the Blowfish, which personifies, gives human qualities to the concept of time. Then we're going to look through a few photos, they're just travel photos I have as usual, of different scenes in nature and think about how to personify them. Then you're going to write a 10 or more line poem that personifies a scene in nature. It's similar to the extended metaphor poem, except this time you're going to be personifying some element in nature. Most ninth graders have a pretty good understanding of what personification is, but I still want to define it and then add a little bit more explanation. Personification is a type of figurative language in which a poet gives human qualities, feelings, actions, or characteristics to an inanimate object. This is a little bit more complicated than it sounds, because what if you give an inanimate object animal characteristics? Like you said that the car behind me kept barking at me to move. That's still really the same idea of comparing an inanimate object to something that is living and capable of making decisions. So it really is still personification. What if you take an animal and give it human qualities? Yeah, that's pretty much personification too. We could use the word anthropomorphizing. That's a pretty long word. So you can use personification different ways. One thing that you can't do with personification and you want to be careful of is saying something like the water is running as an example of personification. You say, well, water can't run. Well, no, it can't run if you're defining running as only a human action, but you can usually say that, the printer is running or the water is running. That's not personification because we use the word run to mean many different things. So just make sure that you're giving an inanimate object human or animal characteristics in this activity. This is a scene, I did not take this photo, of San Francisco in fog. However, the short poem I'm about to read takes place in Chicago. Carl Sandburg often wrote about his hometown of Chicago. Regardless, when you think of describing this scene, you can use imagery, but it still wouldn't capture it completely of what fog is as it moves into the city and then leaves again. So Carl Sandburg here decided to give it animal qualities. It's a very short poem. It's almost like a haiku in its simplicity. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches and then moves on. Simple poem. And by the way, this is a poem in a book of hundreds of poems by Carl Sandburg. It's not like this made him famous. When you think about the qualities of fog, the way that it moves in often during the night and then moves out in the morning and you barely notice it, it makes sense to compare it to a cat. So really the poem is an extended metaphor, but as I said a minute ago, if you're giving inanimate objects animal actions as well, that can pretty much count as personification. This is a good time for you to listen to the song, and I do have it embedded on our website as well. And you're going through and identifying rhyme just to review some things from the sound unit, and then also personification and similes. So play that and then move on. Our goal in this activity is to personify a scene in nature. So in this introduction, we're going to practice that a little bit by considering the qualities of specific objects, kind of like Carl Sandburg did in the poem a few slides ago about fog. What are the qualities of fog or of a river or of the ocean or whatever? And think about that. Then consider the object that you choose itself and then the relationship to the scene as a whole. How do they feel about that scene? Do they feel comfortable? Do they feel happy? Do they feel sad? And that's a good way to personify things as well. And we're going to just have one line per image here. First one, you don't have to be writing anything down for this. This is just to introduce the poem that you're going to write. This is a waterfall, I believe, in Costa Rica. The waterfall wept into the inviting pool. And here, because it's falling water, it makes sense, like tears, to use personification to describe it. And it helps to capture the scene a bit more. I'm not sure that wept is the best word here, especially because of the blue sky and everything. It might work better if it was a really gloomy day, but it still gives human or animal qualities to the waterfall. The rest of them think about first. The tree here, if we spoke literally, we would say that it is frozen. That's it. But if you think about the tree, how does it feel in this moment? And what is its relationship to other things around it? What I came up with here is the frostbitten tree, again, humans get frostbite, grimaced at the biting winds. The winds that are coming through that are creating this. This was in West Virginia in Dolly Shots wilderness area. And you can see that the tree, while it literally isn't grimacing, can't grimace. If it were a human and we're going to give it human qualities, it would certainly be grimacing at the biting winds. This is a volcano in Costa Rica, Volcan Arenal, which is just this perfect conical shape. And the smoke around it is actually because it's an active volcano. That's not just a cloud. That is actual smoke from the heat in the volcano. So how do you think that the volcano would be feeling here as a result? Pretty common for us to say that the volcano was angry. Volcan Arenal fumed. Its anger, a cloud around its head. This is in northern Minnesota near the border with Canada in a wilderness area as well. The boundary waters, they're called. And here, the trees. Let's focus on the trees. If we were to give them human qualities, what would they be thinking? Well, we see the reflection there. That's probably something good to work with. The trees gazed musingly at their reflection. And I use musingly because it's just such a quiet, calm, serene scene, and they're sort of just sizing themselves up. They don't seem to have much of an opinion of themselves, proud or shy or embarrassed or something like that. This is in Morocco, and this valley is really good farmland, but the hills are really dry. So how do you think the hills feel about the lush farmland? I said the arid, meaning dry, hills are envious of the lush valley. Number 6, this is in Montana. It's actually called Cracker Lake, and it's way in the backcountry, but this beautiful glacier lake. And because of the way that the hills fall into it on both sides, and this is actually the glacier up here. It's a dying glacier. It actually might be gone by now. But how do you think that the lake feels? I said that it slumbered in the cradle of the mountains, like it was asleep because it's so calm. This is in Ireland on the west coast, the Great Blasket Islands. And the grass here looks very soft and in a way sort of like a blanket. And then the house is stuck in the middle and seems to be sort of being taken over by nature again. So I said, the house sleeps serenely in the soft blanket of lush grass. This is in Bolivia. It's a salt desert called Salar de Uyuni. And how does the ground feel in this case? Given the cracks, given the dryness of it, given the sort of sand/salt storm in the distance, the ground was parched by the cruel sun. And here I personified the ground by saying it was parched, like really thirsty. And then I also did it with the word sun by saying that it's cruel. This is in Slovenia. It's one of the largest cave complexes in the world. And I wanted to personify, I can't remember if these are stalagmites or stalactites. I can never remember which is which. You probably know. But what are they similar to? The cave's spiny fingers reached into the depths of the cave, comparing them to fingers. This is Yellowstone Canyon in Wyoming. And because the water is so squeezed into this tiny little ravine, I said, the white water squeezed its way through the veins of the canyon. Now, the word squeeze here is not personification. That's what some people make this mistake in their poems, because a machine can squeeze. You can have use the word squeeze outside of the human context. But veins now, normally we're talking about human beings or animals. Everything in blue in my sample is an example of personification. The stone listens patiently to the water, who embraces its mossy fingers. The stone silently watches as the water carries the leaves and the spiders delicately on its transparent skin. It dozes off with the last pale shadows of the day. So, pretty simple. Just a stone in the water and personifying it different ways. The words listen, embrace, and watches are obviously personification, but notice as well that I use some nouns like fingers and skin. You can use the word skin in other contexts that don't relate to humans or animals, but it's pretty rare. And normally we wouldn't call the surface of the water the skin of it, in English at least. And then dozes off, falls asleep, clearly personification. Notice that I did not put the word carries in blue because, yes, human beings can carry things, but the water carrying the leaves, we would use that word for water as well. Like the water carries the boat. Or you could say that the car or truck carries the supplies of some kind. So that isn't the best example of personification. The last thing to notice is how I break from one line to the next. That they're not sentences. Remember, we're not writing a paragraph here, we're writing a poem. It's in free verse, but it still should look like a poem. And the line breaks, when you decide to move from one line to the next, is important and up to you. It can help to create emphasis on a particular image. So think about your line breaks, where you're going to put them, and notice that I still have punctuation in the poem just to tell people where to stop. They're sort of like rests in music, but I don't have it at every line. Some lines I have what's called enjambment. You don't really need to know that word, but that's when you don't have any punctuation at the end of a line. And when you read it aloud, you just go straight into the next line. Something like, the stone listens patiently to the water. Notice I didn't pause there. I didn't say, the stone listens patiently to the water, who embraces it. No, who embraces its mossy fingers. If you are having a hard time coming up with ideas for this, please feel free to email me. But in the email, maybe say something about a scene that you could write about. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a golf course. If you have a camp that you go to that your family has, you can write about that. You could write about the beach and focus on a particular scene and perhaps even a particular object and its relationship to that scene. Thanks for watching.